How sure are you that you can trust the people closest to you? Ethan Wilson's life seemed unshakable. Successful career, perfect family, a prestigious home, until one small discovery in the trash can turned his world upside down: a positive pregnancy test. But how could that be possible when he'd had a vasectomy just 3 months ago, a secret he'd shared with no one? This is just the beginning of a whirlwind unraveling of lies, betrayal, and hidden truths, driving Ethan toward a dramatic turning point. When stability crumbles, what remains of a man who believed he was in control? This story is about revenge, precision, and how far one can go to reclaim control over their destiny. My dear friend, be sure to subscribe to my channel if this is your first time here, and give your royal like to this video. Ethan Wilson thrived on structure. His mornings followed an unbreakable pattern: awake by 5 a.m., 2 hours at the gym, then a shower, breakfast, and out the door by 8 o'clock. This strict schedule provided him with a sense of mastery over his life, a quality he credited for his success. At 37, Ethan was an accomplished professional in corporate finance, living in an impressive home in an affluent neighborhood. He was confident in the stability of his marriage, too, but that confidence began to waver on a crisp October morning. As usual, Ethan stepped out of the shower, steam fogging the bathroom mirror. He wrapped a towel around his waist and reached for his electric razor, but his eyes caught something unusual in the trash can: a flash of blue amid crumpled tissues. At first, he dismissed it as unimportant, but when his toothbrush cap fell to the floor, curiosity got the better of him. Kneeling to retrieve it, he hesitated before plucking the blue object from the bin. His breath hitched when he realized what he was holding: a pregnancy test. Positive. The vivid blue lines stared back at him, stark and undeniable. Ethan's mind reeled. It couldn't be real. Just 3 months earlier, he'd undergone a vasectomy at a clinic far from home. The decision, inspired by his brother Tony's bitter experience with a deceitful ex-wife, was supposed to prevent situations exactly like this. Tony's advice had been clear: don't take chances. Camilla trapped me with her second kid, swore she was on the pill. Ethan hadn't told anyone about the procedure, not even Olivia, his wife. Yet here it was, evidence of a pregnancy. The sound of water cascading in the master bathroom interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Olivia was singing softly, a familiar Stevie Nicks tune she'd been obsessed with for months. Ethan froze, replaying the past few weeks in his head with sudden clarity. Her late nights at work, the new perfume she credited to a gift from a coworker, the way she'd grown distant, her excuses of exhaustion and stress when he tried to get close. He clenched the plastic stick, his hand shaking as he thought back to last month's neighborhood barbecue. Olivia had volunteered to help Elijah, their neighbor, with setup. They'd been gone just a bit too long. The memory left a bitter taste in his mouth. The squeak of the shower shutting off jolted him back to the present. Moving quickly, Ethan wrapped the pregnancy test in a wad of toilet paper and slid it into the pocket of his suit jacket. His reflection in the mirror stared back at him, sharp, composed, and yet internally unraveling. "Ethan?" Olivia's voice floated through the door. "Can you start the coffee? I'm behind schedule today." Clearing his throat, he forced a calm tone. "Already on it." Downstairs, he moved methodically, setting up the coffee maker and preparing 2 travel mugs. He added vanilla creamer and sugar to hers, a small ritual he once cherished. Now it felt hollow, like a chore performed for a stranger. His phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Tony. "Drinks tonight? Camilla's lawyer is being a nightmare about custody." Ethan hesitated before typing back, "Can't, dealing with something big." After a moment he added, "Might need your lawyer's contact soon." The reply was instant. "Shit, call me. Don't do anything dumb, okay?" Olivia's heels clicked against the hardwood floor as she entered the kitchen, wearing a red dress she'd recently claimed was a bargain find. Her signature perfume lingered in the air, a scent Ethan now suspected wasn't chosen for him. "You're amazing," she said brightly, grabbing her coffee. Adjusting his tie, she added, "Dinner with your mom tonight at 7, don't forget." "I'll have to skip it," Ethan replied, feigning a casual tone. "Late meeting with the Reynolds account." Was that relief flickering in her expression? "Oh well, Maybe tomorrow then, she offered, her voice light. Maybe, he replied non-committally, watching her closely. Olivia Mitchell Wilson, 32, radiant strawberry blonde hair, piercing green eyes, and a face that once seemed incapable of deceit. She was beautiful, charming, and carrying someone else's child. "Have a good day," she called over her shoulder as she walked out. Ethan didn't respond. Sliding into his Tesla, he gripped the wheel tightly. Instead of heading to the office, he turned in the opposite direction, claiming an emergency dental appointment would give him the time he needed to unravel this mystery. Parking 2 blocks from home, he positioned his car where he could observe the driveway without drawing attention. The neighborhood was serene, with most residents already at work. At 9:45 a.m., a silver Mercedes pulled into his driveway. Olivia's mother, Janet, had arrived for their usual Tuesday gardening session, a ritual Ethan suspected was more about gossip than horticulture. Creeping through the alley, Ethan edged closer to the patio, staying hidden behind the Hendersons' tall fence. From his vantage point, he could hear snippets of their conversation. "He didn't come home last night?" Janet's voice carried a mix of concern and curiosity. "No," Olivia replied, her tone tinged with guilt Ethan hadn't detected before. "Another late meeting." Janet's voice lowered conspiratorially. "Have you told Elijah about the baby?" Ethan's grip on the fence tightened, his knuckles whitening. His suspicions were no longer just fears, they were facts. The reality Ethan had been dreading was now impossible to deny. Elijah Moore, the affable neighbor who had borrowed his golf clubs just weeks earlier and always seemed to find opportunities to compliment Ethan's wife, was far more than a casual acquaintance. He knew. Olivia's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, compelling Ethan to inch closer to overhear her words. "He's unraveling," she murmured. "Maggie's been snooping, asking questions about those late nights at work." "Typical men," Janet scoffed, her tone laced with disdain. "They never think 2 steps ahead. But darling, stay focused. Have you scheduled the ultrasound yet?" "It's set for next week," Olivia replied matter-of-factly. "Good," Janet said with a sharp nod. "This weekend, tell Ethan about the pregnancy. He'll be so overjoyed about the baby that he won't suspect a thing." The casual ease with which they plotted to deceive him struck Ethan like a dagger to the heart. 8 years of what he thought was a loving marriage had been reduced to a calculated facade. "And what about Elijah's wife?" Janet inquired, her curiosity piqued. "Maggie?" Olivia's laugh was dismissive, though her voice betrayed a flicker of unease. "She's clueless, too wrapped up in her charity work and book clubs to notice a thing. Elijah says she'd never suspect him. She still thinks of him as the devoted college sweetheart she married." Ethan's mind churned as he processed their words. Maggie Moore could become either a valuable ally or a significant obstacle in what lay ahead. He needed more information. "I'm not sure how much longer I can keep this up, Mom," Olivia confessed, her voice wavering. "The morning sickness, the constant lying, and sometimes when Ethan looks at me, I can't shake the feeling that he's figured it out." "Don't be absurd," Janet said with a wave of her hand. "Ethan's as predictable as they come. That's why you chose him. Stability, security. He'll make a wonderful father. And he will be, to this child and any others." Their laughter felt like poison spreading through Ethan's veins. "Predictable," he repeated silently, the word reverberating in his mind as he backed away from the fence and returned to his car. They believed they had him pegged, that he would do nothing. But they were about to discover how deeply they had miscalculated. Settling into the driver's seat of his Tesla, Ethan powered up his laptop and accessed the security cameras he'd installed around their home. Olivia had once dismissed them as a paranoid extravagance, but now they were his salvation. He downloaded 3 months of footage, zeroing in on the days he'd been working late. The evidence was undeniable. Elijah's black BMW appeared in the driveway minutes after Ethan left for work. Olivia and Elijah were seen slipping into the house on mornings she claimed to be working from home. Quick, stolen kisses in the garage. Ethan meticulously logged every instance, dates, times, durations. Each entry tightened the noose around their deceit. His mind wandered to the vasectomy, a decision he had kept to himself. Once a private measure, it now stood as indisputable proof of Olivia's lies. The bitter irony would have been laughable if his rage weren't so consuming. He next accessed their shared cloud storage. Olivia's tendency to use their anniversary as her default password made it laughably easy. The photos synced from her phone exposed the full scale of her betrayal. Intimate images of her and Elijah, text messages dripping with affection, selfies taken in locations Ethan recognized as their former date spots. "Idiots," he muttered, encrypting the damning evidence and saving it to a secure drive. They believed they were invincible, clever even. They hadn't accounted for his precision, the very quality they ridiculed. A notification buzzed on his phone. "Dinner with Janet, 7 p.m. He deleted it, along with every other shared event in their calendar. Opening his banking app, Ethan began severing financial ties. Isolating his accounts would take time, but he had plenty. Olivia thought he was diligently at work, blissfully unaware. Predictability had its advantages. An email from Olivia's work account interrupted his thoughts. It had been sent to their shared home address. "Don't forget to pick up my prescription from Dr. Anderson's office. Love you." The implications hit him like a freight train. She was using their joint insurance for prenatal care, leaving a paper trail that tied him to a child that wasn't his. Starting the car, Ethan outlined his next moves with cold precision. First, he would visit his lawyer to begin divorce proceedings. Then he'd secure his assets at the bank. Finally, he'd collect Olivia's medical records from Dr. Anderson's office. Every step would be calculated, deliberate. The mirrored facade of the downtown medical plaza gleamed in the midday sun as Ethan entered. "Mr. Wilson," the receptionist greeted warmly. "Is Mrs. Wilson with you today?" "Not today," he said smoothly. "I just need to pick up some test results from Dr. Anderson's office." "6th floor," she replied. "You know the way." In the elevator, Ethan checked his phone. Missed calls from Olivia and Janet lit up the screen. Let them wonder. His boss had readily approved leave for emergency dental work. Being predictable came with its perks. At the doctor's office, the receptionist greeted him with a professional smile. "How can I help you?" "I'm Ethan Wilson. My wife mentioned picking up her prescription. While I'm here, could I also get copies of our recent medical records?" "Insurance reasons?" she asked, jotting a note. "Exactly," he said evenly. Minutes later, he walked out holding a manila envelope containing lab results, notes, and ultrasound schedules. Another piece of his arsenal was complete. Next, Ethan stopped at Western Union, wiring cash to himself at a distant location. 3 separate ATM withdrawals followed, each at the maximum limit. He needed freedom, and freedom required cash. At a nondescript strip mall, he purchased a prepaid phone and activated it in the parking lot. His next destination was a small post office. On an envelope addressed to Maggie Moore, he wrote in bold block letters, "They're having babies." Inside, he enclosed the pregnancy test and a note with a burner phone number. There was no return address. As he dropped the envelope into the mail slot, a grim sense of purpose settled over him. There would be no turning back. The skyline receded in his rearview mirror as Ethan drove away. Olivia and Elijah believed they were weaving a romantic fantasy, but Ethan would rewrite their narrative. It would not be the story of their love, it would be their downfall. They had underestimated him. They wouldn't make that mistake again. Maggie Moore was teetering on the edge of unraveling every secret, and when she finally did, the real mission would commence. Ethan's phone buzzed once more. Olivia's name lit up the screen. This time he answered. "Ethan, where are you? The office said something about a dental issue," her voice pressed. "Did they now?" His tone was cool, detached, calculated. Shifting the subject, he asked, "How's your morning going?" "Hectic," she admitted. "This new campaign has me running ragged. Are you okay? You sound off." "Off?" Ethan's gaze drifted to a young couple ambling past his car, their fingers entwined. "Maybe I'm just tired. Late nights at work. You know how that goes." An uneasy silence stretched between them, crackling with unspoken tension. He could almost hear her mind racing. "What are you trying to say?" she finally asked. Maybe nothing. Or maybe everything. Have you asked Elijah? Her sharp intake of breath confirmed his suspicions. Ethan, wait, she began, but he cut her off, his voice steady and deliberate. I know about the baby, Olivia. I know everything. Please, just let me explain, she pleaded, her voice cracking. 8 years, Olivia, he said, the words heavy with betrayal. 8 years of marriage, and you expected me to unknowingly raise someone else's child. Were you ever going to tell me, or was I just the loyal husband who never asked too many questions? It's not what you think, she begged, desperation coloring her words. I love you, Ethan. We can fix this. Please come home. Ethan's laugh was devoid of humor, cold as stone. That house stopped being my home the day you turned it into a shrine to your affair with Elijah. Tell your mother I won't be joining you for dinner tonight, or ever again. He ended the call, blocked her number, and for good measure, blocked her entire family. The time for talking was over. His burner phone vibrated, displaying a text from an unknown number. Package received. Meeting still on for tomorrow. Maggie. Satisfied, he typed a quick reply. Coffee shop on 5th, 10 a.m., come alone. Her response came almost instantly. I will. I have things to show you. Starting the engine, Ethan let his thoughts swirl. Maggie Moore, the overlooked suburban wife who hosted book clubs and charity drives, had been underestimated for far too long. Just like him. Together, they were about to orchestrate something neither Olivia nor Elijah could predict. His phone buzzed again. Olivia, this time. Whatever you think you know, you're wrong. Please come home. Let's talk. I love you. Ethan deleted the message without hesitation. Love? That was nothing more than a convenient veil for deceit. He'd learned his lesson. Now, it was time for revenge. As the sun set, Ethan parked outside a discreet hotel. It was expensive enough to guarantee privacy and far from familiar territory. Tomorrow, he'd meet Maggie to finalize their plan. Tonight, he'd review the evidence he'd meticulously compiled. Sliding the keycard into his room, he allowed himself a grim smile. Olivia and Elijah had crafted their narrative. The affair, the hidden pregnancy, the unwitting husband who'd unknowingly care for their child. But every story has a twist. The coffee shop on 5th was a world away from Olivia's upscale preferences. Its patrons prized anonymity over ambiance, and the coffee was unpretentious and strong. Ethan arrived 20 minutes early, claiming a corner booth with a clear view of the entrances. His coffee sat untouched as he watched the door. Maggie arrived precisely at 10 a.m. Her punctuality amused him. Gone were her book club cardigans and easy smiles. Today she was sharp and composed in a sleek black blazer, her hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun. A leather briefcase dangled from her hand, a picture of precision. Ethan rose instinctively as she approached. Mrs. Moore. Mr. Wilson, she greeted, her voice calm though her jaw was tight. Shall we skip the formalities? By all means, he said, gesturing to the seat across from him. Coffee? No thanks. I've had enough caffeine for one day. Placing her briefcase on the table, she added, We have a lot to cover. A waitress approached but retreated under Maggie's withering glance. Once they were alone, Maggie opened her briefcase and withdrew a thick manila folder. First, she said briskly, thank you for the package. It confirmed what I already suspected. She spread an array of photos and documents on the table, credit card statements for hotels, receipts from restaurants, and candid shots of Elijah and Olivia entering various establishments together. The timestamps aligned perfectly with Ethan's own findings. How long have you known? Ethan asked, examining the evidence. Suspected since June, confirmed by August, she replied, brushing her fingers over a receipt. Elijah got sloppy, using our shared credit card for their rendezvous. He thought I never checked. They always assume we're predictable, Ethan said, shaking his head. Precisely, Maggie said with a sharp smile. The dutiful wife too distracted by charity work, the committed husband too busy with his career. They built their affair on our supposed blindness. And now? Ethan prompted. Maggie retrieved a laptop from her briefcase, flipping it open and angling the screen toward him. Now, we teach them how wrong they were. On the screen played high-resolution footage of Elijah and Olivia exiting a high-end hotel. They shared an intimate kiss before parting ways. The timestamp read 2:47 p.m., a time Olivia had claimed she'd be meeting a client. "There's more," Maggie said coolly. "Bank records showing suspicious withdrawals, a secret email account, and a burner phone he thought I didn't know about. And then, of course, the pregnancy. That was an unexpected twist." Ethan's jaw tightened. "They're planning to pin it on me," he said bitterly. "I had a vasectomy 3 months ago. Olivia doesn't know." Maggie's brows lifted slightly, her first visible reaction. "Clever. Does anyone else know?" "Just my brother, and now you." Ethan slid his own folder across the table, revealing medical records and insurance claims. "They've been using our health insurance for her prenatal care. They left a paper trail." Maggie's laugh was sharp and humorless. "They think they're masterminds, reshaping our lives for their benefit." Her eyes met his, piercing and steady. "The question is, Mr. Wilson, what do we plan to do about it?" Ethan locked his gaze on her, unwavering. "I intend to dismantle them entirely, their careers, their finances, their social lives, but I can't do it alone." "You're right," she replied, her voice steady. "You can't." Without hesitation, she reached for another folder, this one crammed with legal papers. "I've been preparing for this moment. Elijah thinks his assets are untouchable, but he has no idea I've been documenting everything. Every lie, every betrayal, every penny spent on their little fantasy." Ethan scrutinized her. "So you're seeking revenge too?" Maggie tilted her head thoughtfully. "Revenge? Not exactly. I'm after justice. I want them to endure every consequence they've earned, to feel the weight of the pain they've inflicted on us, magnified, until their perfect little world crumbles." She spread an array of papers across the table: property deeds, financial reports, business ledgers. "Elijah's entire reputation hinges on trust. He's the community's golden boy, a devoted family man, a model businessman. What do you think happens when the truth comes out?" "And Olivia?" Ethan asked, his tone colder. "Her career's her identity. She's been angling for that senior marketing director position for months. Everything depends on her image." "Then we strip it all away," Maggie said with razor-sharp determination. "Their careers, their reputations, their future will destroy the foundation of lies they've built." Ethan nodded slowly, envisioning the plan as it took form. "We need precision. They can't see this coming. I'm already ahead of you." Maggie opened a document on her laptop. 3 phases. First, we gather every shred of evidence, every mistake, every weak spot. Second, we secure our legal ground. Third, her lips curved into a predatory smile, we dismantle them, publicly, completely, and permanently. "Why are you telling me all this?" Ethan asked, though the answer was already clear. "Because Olivia isn't innocent. She made her choices just like Elijah. They're both culpable. It's only fitting we bring them down together," Maggie said, her certainty unshakable. Ethan considered her words, the logic undeniable. Together, they had the means, the motive, and the proof to destroy the lives of those who had betrayed them. He extended his hand across the table. "Partners, then!" Maggie grasped his hand firmly, her expression as unyielding as steel. "Partners, let's begin." For the next 2 hours, they worked methodically, ignoring their untouched coffees. Ethan shared Olivia's recent medical appointment records, while Maggie detailed Elijah's financial vulnerabilities. Piece by piece, they constructed a timeline of betrayal, cross-referencing dates and evidence until their plan was airtight. As the cafe filled with the lunchtime crowd, they packed their materials. Ethan noticed Maggie's wedding ring was conspicuously absent. "One last thing," she said, pulling out a second phone identical to the one in his pocket. "A secure line. We can't risk them intercepting anything." Ethan added the number to his phone and nodded. "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," Maggie confirmed. "I'll focus on the financials. You get anything from your home that locks in their timeline?" Without ceremony, they parted ways. Ethan climbed into his car, his personal phone buzzing with a message from Olivia. "Please come home. Whatever you think you know, it's not what it seems. I love you." He showed the text to Maggie, who paused by his window. She read it and let out a dark, knowing laugh. "They really have no idea what's coming," she said. "No," Ethan replied, deleting the message. "They don't." He watched her taillights vanish into the traffic, the enormity of his transformation settling in. In just one day, the man he had been, a loving, devoted husband, was gone. In his place was someone colder, sharper, and utterly unrelenting. Olivia and Elijah had crafted their story. Now, he and Maggie would turn it into their nightmare. 3 days later, in a sleek conference room at a downtown hotel, the air buzzed softly with the hum of keyboards and whispers of air conditioning. Ethan sat across from Maggie as she carefully laid out an array of documents. "Their arrogance is staggering," Maggie said, tapping a stack of printed emails. "They didn't even bother to use secure accounts." Ethan scanned the pages. "How many people are you planning to notify?" 57, Maggie replied with a glint in her eye. "Every member of Elijah's church group, his entire business board, his golf partners, and every so-called friend who stood by them." "And Olivia's workplace?" Maggie slid a USB drive across the table. "Her entire office directory, including personal emails. Their IT security is laughable." Ethan pocketed the drive, impressed. "You're good at this." "I wasn't always Mrs. Elijah Moore," she said coolly. "My career in corporate intelligence taught me one thing: secrets destroy empires." "Then let's build one of destruction," Ethan replied, pulling out his laptop. "Here's the draft of the email. Want to take a look?" Maggie leaned over his shoulder, her expensive perfume filling the air, a sharp contrast to Olivia's scent. "Dear friends," Ethan read aloud, "we feel you deserve to know the truth about Elijah Moore and Olivia Wilson. Enclosed is evidence of their affair and the pregnancy they're concealing." "Too formal," Maggie said, taking over the keyboard. Her fingers moved swiftly. "Make it personal. Make it sting." She typed as she spoke. "You know them as pillars of the community, the faithful husband, the ambitious executive. But here's the truth. They're liars and manipulators who thought they could deceive everyone." Ethan nodded approvingly. "That's much better." "Timing is everything," Maggie said, straightening. "Olivia's big promotion interview is Thursday. Elijah's charity gala is Friday. We hit them when they're most vulnerable." "Maximum exposure, maximum impact," Ethan agreed. Maggie opened another folder, her expression calculating. "Now, about the financials. My attorney's already working on freezing assets. Elijah's been transferring money to try to protect it. Amateur moves. I've tracked every transaction." "Olivia's doing the same," Ethan added. "She opened a new account last week. She's gearing up for a fight." "Let her try," Maggie said with satisfaction. "I've already locked down our joint accounts." The look on his face when his credit card was declined at lunch was burned into memory, a mix of disbelief and embarrassment. Ethan's second phone, the untraceable one, vibrated unexpectedly. A notification lit up the screen. Their private investigator had confirmed the arrangement. "Subject entering Hotel Belmont, 2:15 p.m. The description of the woman accompanying him aligned perfectly with the dossier. Ethan handed the phone to Maggie, his expression sardonic. "They're slipping," he muttered, "using the same spot every time. Amateurish." "Lazy," Maggie agreed, her eyes flicking back to her laptop. She pulled up a digital calendar. Elijah's cover is another business lunch with clients, while Olivia's excuse is a presentation for downtown stakeholders. Ethan's laugh was dry and cold. "Same tired lies, different day." "Perfect," Maggie replied, fingers flying across the keyboard as she updated the timeline. She added precise details: date, time, location. A knock at the conference room door broke their concentration. The hotel manager stepped in, a folder in hand. "Mr. Wilson, here are the security documents you requested," the manager announced, placing the folder on the table. "Appreciate it, James," Ethan said, slipping a plain envelope discreetly across the table. The manager gave a slight nod and exited. "What's in there?" Maggie asked, leaning forward as Ethan opened the folder. "Something better than surveillance footage," Ethan answered, revealing a trove of check-in records and room service receipts. 6 months of transactions, times, dates, credit card numbers, you name it. Maggie's smile was razor sharp. This is devastating. It'll crush them. That's the idea, Ethan said, spreading the documents across the table. They thought they could make fools of us. Let's show them how wrong they are. Maggie checked her phone, scrolling through messages. Elijah's been texting non-stop this morning. Listen to this gem. Maggie, we need to talk. Things feel off lately. Let's have dinner and sort things out. Ethan's jaw tightened. Olivia tried the same angle yesterday. Ethan, let's fix this. What we have is worth fighting for. Maggie's smirk widened. They're panicking. Panic breeds mistakes. More leverage for us. Ethan turned to the window, gazing at the sprawling city below. Have you thought about what's next, when this is all over? Maggie joined him, their reflections melding in the glass. I've had an offer from a firm in Boston. Fresh start, clean slate. You? A company in Chicago wants me to head a new division, Ethan admitted. I've been weighing it. Running away? She teased, her tone light but probing. Ethan turned to face her, unflinching. Strategic relocation. Let them stew in the wreckage of their own making. We'll be busy creating better lives. Returning to her laptop, Maggie gestured for Ethan to come closer. Speaking of wreckage, I've been crafting something for Olivia's upcoming promotion interview. Want a sneak peek? The sunlight streamed into the room as Ethan leaned over her shoulder, their strategy solidifying. Somewhere across town, oblivious to the approaching catastrophe, Olivia and Elijah continued their charade. The next morning at 8:45 a.m., Ethan sat in his car, parked strategically near the marketing firm's sleek office tower. Workers streamed in, clutching coffee cups and scrolling through their phones. Right on schedule, Olivia's red Tesla rolled into her reserved spot. Ethan's burner phone vibrated with a message from Maggie. All set on my end. You? She's just arrived. What about him? Ethan typed back. Elijah's at his board meeting wearing that smug grin. Won't last long, Maggie replied. Ethan's smile was grim as he connected to their secure network and hit send. The emails, prepared with surgical precision, were dispatched to a curated list. Professional associates first, followed by their social networks, and finally, close family and friends. The message would radiate outward, dismantling their targets' reputations piece by piece. Maggie's burner phone rang. How's it looking? She asked. First wave delivered. Her office and every client on her next big project, Ethan reported. You? Board members, business partners, even his little protege intern, Maggie said with evident satisfaction. When do you think they'll notice? Ethan asked. Already unraveling, Maggie answered. Word in the boardroom is phones are buzzing, and the side eyes are starting. Ethan's focus shifted to Olivia's car as two security guards approached. Something's happening. Switching to video. Do it, Maggie said, linking their feeds. Ethan's camera captured Olivia stepping out of her car, her confident demeanor wavering as the guards intercepted her. Miss Wilson, management needs to see you immediately, one guard stated firmly. I have a meeting with a client, Olivia responded, confusion edging her voice. It's been canceled. Please follow us, the guard insisted. Maggie's laughter came softly through the call. Elijah's in for a similar experience. They've just called an emergency session without him. Ethan adjusted his camera to show the lobby, where employees clustered together, whispering and glancing at their phones. Think she's figured it out yet? Maggie asked. Give it another minute, Ethan said, glancing at his watch. Her assistant usually delivers her coffee about now. Right on cue, a young woman with a tablet rushed through the lobby, stopping mid-stride to check her phone. Her face went pale. There we go, Ethan commented. Watch it spread. The assistant hurried to a nearby group, showing them her screen. A ripple of shock passed through the cluster, heads bowing over their phones. Meanwhile, Maggie's feed captured Elijah being escorted from the boardroom, his confidence evaporating with each step. Mr. Moore, someone called as he passed. Is it true about the affair? What about the child? Elijah stiffened, pivoting slowly. What exactly are you implying? He asked, his tone uneven. A sharper voice cut in next. It's all over the internet. Everyone's seen the evidence. Pictures, hotel receipts, the whole package. Ethan shifted his attention toward Olivia's building. Through the glass lobby, she stood surrounded by senior staff. Even from this distance, her anxious gestures were unmistakable. Maggie's voice crackled with anticipation on the call. "Check your backup phone," she urged. "The private investigator sent over something big." Ethan pulled out his secondary device. The screen illuminated with a series of photos, images of Elijah and Olivia meeting the day before. But these weren't the usual shots. These were intimate, stolen moments captured through unguarded windows, moments they'd assumed were invisible. "Add these to the next batch," Ethan instructed. "Already done," Maggie confirmed. "Plus, I have the credit card transactions. Let's make sure everyone knows how much of the company's money Elijah blew on their little escapade." "Excellent," Ethan murmured, fingers flying across the keyboard as he composed another email. "Wait until they see what's next," he added with a smirk. "Olivia's ultrasound pictures, time-stamped and cross-referenced with the hotel stays. No one will have to guess where the baby came from." "You're ruthless," Maggie said approvingly. "I'm here for it." Movement outside caught Ethan's eye. Olivia stepped out of the building, flanked by security guards. Her face was pale, streaked with mascara trails. "The curtain's going up," Ethan remarked, his voice laced with cold amusement. "She's heading to her car." "Elijah's out too," Maggie reported, satisfaction dripping from her tone. "But he's got lawyers with him. Looks like the board sent someone to deal with him." From a distance, they watched the chaos they'd orchestrated. Olivia struggled with her car keys, dropping them repeatedly before finally unlocking the door. Across the street, Elijah was in an intense exchange with a suited man who kept pointing to a document. "Is Phase 2 ready?" Maggie asked. "On my mark," Ethan replied, starting a new email draft, this one targeting their victims' personal circles. Friends, family, everyone who'd ever stood by them. "Timing is everything," he reminded her. "Speaking of timing," Maggie said with a hint of humor, "Elijah's mistress just showed up at his office. Looks like she got the email, too." Ethan glanced back at Olivia, who sped out of the lot so recklessly she nearly collided with a lamppost. "Where do you think they'll retreat to?" Maggie asked. "Probably their favorite hotel, to figure out their damage control," Ethan replied. "Not happening," he added with a chilling grin. "I sent everything to the hotel management earlier. They're banned." A notification popped up, a message from Janet, Olivia's mother, demanding answers. He added her to the growing list of recipients. "Is Wave 2 ready?" Maggie prompted. Ethan surveyed the chaos outside. More people poured from the buildings, their faces glued to their phones, their expressions a mixture of shock and disbelief. Social media buzzed with activity, hashtags multiplying as the scandal spread. "Do it," Ethan commanded. In unison, they pressed send, unleashing another calculated blow. Through their screens, they monitored the fallout, dismantling Olivia and Elijah's lives step by deliberate step. Maggie's voice softened briefly. "Do you ever wonder if we've gone too far?" Ethan's response was immediate. "Do you remember their plan? Using us like pawns? Making me raise their child? Forcing you to watch them build a picture-perfect family?" "You're right," she said, her tone hardening. "No mercy." "None," Ethan agreed, already drafting the third wave of emails. "They made their decisions. We're just making sure they face the consequences." Their improvised headquarters, a hotel suite, hummed with activity. Laptops streamed real-time updates, chronicling the public unraveling of Olivia and Elijah. Sunlight filtered into the room, casting long shadows over the walls lined with evidence boards. "You'll want to see this," Maggie called, holding up her phone. The screen displayed a breaking news alert. "Corporate scandal rocks local executive team," the headline read. "Emergency board meeting underway." Ethan laughed. "Elijah's loving that, no doubt. How's the stock?" "Down 12% since this morning," Maggie reported, checking a finance app. Shareholders aren't thrilled about their CEO's affair, especially not with company funds involved. Another message came through from the investigator. "Targets located. Meeting at Riverside Park. Looks intense." "Want to watch?" Maggie asked, grabbing her coat. "Wouldn't miss it," Ethan replied. They arrived separately, parking at opposite ends of the park for discretion. Through a video call, they coordinated their surveillance. "Visual confirmed," Ethan said, Olivia paced near the fountain, her designer outfit rumpled, her makeup a streaked mess. Elijah's coming from the south, Maggie added. No jacket, tie undone. He's been raking his hands through his hair, classic sign he's unraveling. Through their devices, they observed the confrontation. Even from afar, the tension was palpable. Turn up the mic, Ethan instructed. I want to catch every word. Olivia's voice carried first, sharp and frantic. It's over, Elijah. They know everything. My boss just suspended me. The promotion's gone. My career is ruined. Keep your voice down, Elijah warned, his eyes darting nervously. He grabbed her arm. We need to think. Figure out who's behind this. Who's behind it? Olivia snapped, pulling free from his grip, her voice rising. Ethan knows. He knows about the baby, and now everyone does. My friends, my family, my co-workers, even my mother won't stop calling. Have you seen what they're saying about us online? It's just rumors, Elijah tried to reassure her. We can control the story. Put out a statement. Get ahead of it. Olivia laughed bitterly. Get ahead of it? Elijah, it's already too late. There's no fixing this. From a safe distance, Ethan and Maggie continued to watch. Their satisfaction was icy and complete. The destruction of their spouses' lives was unfolding precisely as planned. Olivia's laugh was brittle, strained under the weight of despair. They've got everything, Elijah. Receipts from the hotels, incriminating photos, all of it. The board knows we misused company money, and your wife— Don't bring Maggie into this, Elijah snapped, his voice edged with frustration. She's not answering my calls anymore. I can't even get into the house. Her lawyers already sent me a notice this morning. She's leaving you, Olivia said, sinking onto a bench and cradling her head in her hands. Ethan's gone too, vanished completely. Her tear-streaked face rose to meet his. He left his wedding ring on my pillow with a note. He knows everything, Elijah. He's probably talking to a divorce lawyer right now. Across town, Ethan and Maggie exchanged a victorious look during their video call. Is it time for the next step? Maggie asked, her tone cool and deliberate. Couldn't be better timing, Ethan replied, setting his laptop on the table and connecting to the park's public Wi-Fi. With a quick tap on the keyboard, he dispatched the next wave of emails. A flurry of notifications lit up both Elijah and Olivia's phones moments later. Their faces grew pale as they scanned the messages, disbelief etched in every line of their features. No, Olivia whispered, her voice barely audible but caught by a hidden microphone. This can't be real. Elijah's hands shook as he swiped through the contents on his screen. There are copies of the ultrasound, screenshots of our private chats, even recordings from board meetings where we— He trailed off, his voice faltering. God help us. What now? Olivia's voice cracked, the weight of her emotions making it tremble. I'm pregnant with your child, Elijah. Everyone knows, and everything is crumbling around us. Running his fingers through his hair, Elijah began pacing. We could leave, disappear and start over. I still have connections. Connections? Olivia interrupted, leaping to her feet. Your contacts are the ones forwarding all this evidence. Face it, Elijah, we're finished. Our careers, our reputations, everything, gone. We're toxic now. Ethan's phone buzzed and he smirked. Check the business headlines, he said to Maggie. Scrolling quickly, Maggie's expression darkened with satisfaction. It's live. The board issued a statement. Elijah Moore is suspended, effective immediately, pending an investigation into ethical breaches and financial misconduct. They watched remotely as Elijah slumped onto the bench, his knees giving out beneath him. The same notification had reached his phone. It's over, he muttered, his voice hollow. Everything I've built is gone. Olivia moved closer, but he pulled away sharply. Don't, he said, his tone ice-cold. This is all your fault. If you hadn't gotten pregnant— My fault? Olivia's voice rose, a blend of anger and incredulity. You swore you'd leave Maggie, that we'd raise this baby together. Adjusting his tie with shaking hands, Elijah avoided her gaze. That plan's dead. I need to call my lawyer. Maybe there's something I can still salvage. Olivia's expression hardened. You're walking away? Just like that? Without turning back, Elijah said, What did you expect? Some kind of fairy tale ending? Ethan and Maggie watched the scene unfold from a safe distance. satisfaction gleaming in their eyes. "Should we send the final batch?" Maggie asked, her tone calm. "Not yet," Ethan replied, shutting his laptop. "Let them stew for a bit longer. Tomorrow, when they think it can't possibly get worse, we'll finish it." Maggie's lips curled into a cold smile. "I like the way you think." Their surveillance equipment packed away, they retreated to their hotel. Phones buzzed non-stop with updates as the story gained momentum. Social media exploded with outrage, and colleagues distanced themselves, feeding the growing scandal. "Did you see their faces?" Maggie asked as they drove back. "The moment they realized no one is coming to their rescue, they'll have to deal with this alone, just like we did." Ethan checked his watch. "They never had a chance, not against us." "We're better at this than they'll ever be," Maggie agreed. "Meet you at Command Central? Time to finalize Phase 3. "One more day," Ethan said, already picturing the endgame. "After tomorrow, there'll be nothing left of their fantasy." By dawn, their hotel suite was dimly lit, cluttered with empty coffee cups and glowing screens. Their laptops displayed precision-engineered emails, each designed to deliver maximum impact. "Timing is key," Maggie remarked, glancing at the clock. "Elijah's emergency board meeting starts in 2 hours. Olivia's HR hearing is at 9. Ethan checked their timeline one final time. "Any word from the press?" Maggie handed him her tablet. "Better than that. Local news is ready to drop the story. CEO's affair sparks financial investigation." Ethan skimmed the piece, a grin playing on his lips. Stock prices plunging, criminal charges looming, board members leaking quotes. People will do anything to protect their investments. Maggie chuckled darkly. Elijah's so-called allies didn't hesitate to turn on him. A text pinged on Ethan's burner phone. "They're both at Meridian Coffee," he told Maggie. "Separate tables. They look miserable. Want to watch?" Maggie grabbed her coat. "Wouldn't miss it." At the coffee shop, they observed their targets from discreet corners. "Olivia's in the back," Ethan reported. "She's been crying." "Elijah's by the window," Maggie said. "He's shaking as he reads something on his phone." The moment was charged as Ethan gave the signal. "Send it." Maggie hit send, unleashing the final wave of emails. Phones buzzed across the coffee shop as Olivia and Elijah checked their devices in unison. Horror replaced misery as realization sank in. "No!" Olivia's anguished voice broke through the quiet. "How is this even happening?" Elijah shot up, his chair toppling behind him. Eyes turned to him as he stormed toward Olivia's table. "What have you done?" he demanded, his voice shaking. "I didn't do anything!" she cried, her tear-streaked face filled with anguish. From their vantage point, Ethan and Maggie watched, satisfied. The destruction they'd orchestrated was complete. Private messages, intimate photos. They had uncovered it all. Elijah slammed his palm onto the table, the noise reverberating through the compact coffee shop. The offshore accounts, the doctored expense reports, everything, even the baby plans, Mr. Moore. A young barista cautiously approached, her hands trembling. "Sir, you need to keep your voice down, or I'll have to ask you to leave." "Keep my voice down?" Elijah let out a bitter, hollow laugh. "My career is over. The board is probably voting me out as we speak." "The SEC is dissecting every line of the financials," Maggie muttered, typing furiously on her laptop. Another email flew out into the digital void as Elijah's phone vibrated on the table. He glanced at the screen, his face transforming from enraged red to ashen white. "No!" He staggered backward, clutching the table for support. "The house, the accounts. What's going on?" Olivia leaned in, gripping her phone tightly. "What is it?" "Maggie's legal team," he rasped, his voice barely audible. "They've frozen everything. The houses, the cars, even my personal bank accounts. All locked down while the fraud investigation continues." "She can't do that," Olivia said, panic rising in her voice. "She can," Elijah replied, sinking into a chair, his head cradled in his hands. "And she did. She's been building this case for months." Through the screen, Ethan's calm voice crackled to life. "And now we send the next message." He pressed a button, and phones across the coffee shop lit up, customers gasping at the flood of notifications. Olivia's hand flew to her mouth as her voice trembled. The ultrasound photos. Our private conversations, they're everywhere. Social media is plastered with them. My family, Elijah croaked. My friends, they'll all see this. Maggie's voice cut through their despair, smooth and detached as she spoke through the video call. Shall we proceed with the finale? Ethan nodded, his expression cold. Send it. The final email burst onto Elijah's entire client list, accompanied by meticulous evidence of his fraudulent activities and the details of how he'd misused their investments to fund his affair. The collective buzz of phones erupted once more. Olivia's tear-filled eyes scanned the damning message. Elijah sat paralyzed, as if struck by lightning. My clients, he whispered, his voice quivering. They're leaving me. Everyone's pulling their accounts. Elijah, please, Olivia pleaded, reaching for his hand. We can't fall apart now. We have to figure this out together. He jerked away from her touch, his face contorted with fury. Don't touch me. This is all your fault. If you hadn't gotten pregnant— My fault! Olivia's voice rose as she stood abruptly, her tears giving way to indignation. You told me we'd be together. You promised to leave her, to build a life with me. A life? Elijah spat the word, his laughter harsh and mocking. Look around, Olivia. We've lost everything. Jobs, reputations, futures. And you still think we can play happy family? He adjusted his tie with trembling hands, his voice icy. The baby isn't my problem. I need to salvage what's left of my career, and I can't do it with you dragging me down. Through the video call, Maggie and Ethan exchanged knowing glances, their satisfaction palpable as Elijah's world crumbled further. Olivia's voice was low, venomous. You coward! You selfish bastard! Call me what you want! Elijah snapped, storming toward the door. Just stay out of my way! Where are you going? Olivia called after him, her voice cracking. To beg my lawyers to clean up this mess, he replied coldly, and don't ever contact me again. As he stormed out, the coffee shop's patrons avoided Olivia's gaze, their unease palpable. She stood motionless, her hand resting protectively on her stomach. Was that mission accomplished? Maggie's voice came through softly over the video call. Almost, Ethan replied, a sly grin spreading across his face as he hit send on one final email. This one targeted Olivia's extended family, a web of judgmental aunts and cousins she had spent years trying to impress. Moments later, Olivia gathered her belongings in trembling hands and hurried out of the shop. Neither she nor Elijah noticed the pair watching their downfall, too absorbed in their own unraveling lives. Back to home base? Maggie asked, sliding into her car. Not yet. Ethan checked his schedule. Her HR review starts in 20 minutes. Shall we witness the final blow? Wouldn't miss it, Maggie said, her smile as cold as steel. We've earned this. They positioned themselves near Olivia's office building, watching her arrive. The confident stride she once carried was replaced by tentative, faltering steps. Amazing, Maggie murmured. They fall apart so quickly when the truth catches up to them. They thought they were invincible, Ethan replied, watching her disappear inside. Never realized they were just pawns. Speaking of pawns, Maggie said, checking her phone, Elijah's board meeting is getting intense. Care for a live update? Show me everything, Ethan said, his grin wolfish. Their revenge was absolute. The targets of their scheme lay shattered. Somewhere in the city, two people who had once believed they were untouchable now faced the full weight of their hubris. A month later, Ethan and Maggie sat in a hotel room transformed into their operational headquarters. Screens displayed a collage of news reports, social media posts, and financial updates, a vivid chronicle of their meticulously orchestrated destruction. Elijah's grasping at straws, Maggie said, scrolling through her tablet. He applied to Morton and Shaw yesterday. The investment firm? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Desperate move. Maggie's smile was razor sharp. I had a chat with their HR this morning, sent them an anonymous tip about his financial misconduct. His application didn't survive an hour. She set the tablet aside. He's tried Richardson Group and Apex Partners too. Same outcome. Olivia's not faring any better, Ethan added, pointing to his laptop. 3 interviews canceled last week after some choice emails about her ethical violations. Any updates from the SEC? Maggie asked, joining him at the evidence wall. Officially, they're still reviewing, Ethan said, showing her a burner phone text. Unofficially, Elijah's in deep trouble. Internal audits exposed years of fraud. He got sloppy because of the affair, Maggie noted, tracing her finger along a timeline. Ethan chuckled, glancing at his laptop. Olivia's apartment hunting in River Heights. Quite the downgrade. Speaking of housing, Maggie said, pulling up a real estate listing. Take a look at this. Elijah's attempts to sell his boat were going nowhere. His tarnished reputation had rendered it untouchable. Nobody wanted anything remotely linked to his name. Poor Elijah, Ethan remarked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Once a celebrated figure in the community, Elijah had become a pariah in less than a month. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock. Room service arrived, delivering freshly brewed coffee and their lunch orders. When the waiter left and they were alone again, both of their phones buzzed with new notifications. Maggie glanced at her screen, smirking as she read the latest message. Well, this is interesting, she began, reading aloud. Elijah just emailed his former business partner. James, I'm begging you. 20 years of friendship has to mean something. Just meet me so I can explain. Did James respond? Ethan asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Oh, absolutely, Maggie replied, her grin widening. Here's his reply. Mr. Moore, as advised by my legal counsel, I cannot engage in communication with you during the investigation. Please refrain from contacting me or the board again. Ethan shook his head, chuckling. Olivia's facing the same freeze-out. Her professional network has completely abandoned her. Nobody wants to risk being tied to her scandal. Have you seen her latest social media posts? Maggie projected Olivia's Instagram feed onto the large wall screen. She's playing the victim card, Maggie observed, claiming she's a tragic, abandoned, pregnant woman. The comments are brutal, Ethan noted, scrolling through the replies. Especially after we leaked those texts where she bragged about tricking me into raising her child. Brilliant strategy, by the way. Maggie raised her coffee cup in mock toast. Public opinion isn't kind to liars. Their private investigator's latest update flashed on Maggie's screen. Target D leaving Morgan Stanley. Meeting request denied. Now heading to the parking lot. Ethan pulled up the surveillance feed, watching Elijah shuffle to his car. His flashy BMW was gone, replaced by a nondescript rental. His once immaculate designer suit was crumpled, and his confident stride had become a defeated trudge. Is it time to move forward with the final stage? Maggie asked, her tone cold and calculating. Ethan nodded. They're at their weakest. Now's the time to destroy what's left. Maggie turned to her laptop. I've compiled files on every potential employer they might approach and every contact they could reach out to. Send them all, Ethan said without hesitation. Let's ensure they can't even get hired for minimum wage jobs. With ruthless efficiency, they crafted damning emails to HR departments, hiring managers, and key professional contacts across the country. Each message was meticulously composed to highlight the target's unethical behavior, effectively blacklisting them from any opportunity. As they worked, Maggie's expression turned curious. Ethan, check your personal email. Olivia sent you a message. Ethan opened the email on another screen. Ethan, it began, I know I've done unforgivable things, but I'm begging you to hear me out. Just one conversation. I've lost everything. My career, my friends, my family's respect. I'm pregnant and completely alone. Elijah won't even return my calls. You were always the better man. Please, show some compassion. Ethan's laughter was sharp and devoid of humor. Compassion? Like the kind they showed us when they plotted to ruin our lives while planning their future with their love child? Delete it, Maggie said icily. She's trying to manipulate you. My emotions died the day I found that pregnancy test, Ethan replied, pressing delete. And we're not finished. No, Maggie agreed, her focus returning to her laptop. We're just getting started. Ethan opened their final list of targets. Ready to send the final wave? Let's make sure they'll never recover. Once the last emails were sent, Ethan leaned back in his chair, a grim satisfaction settling over him. Olivia and Elijah had fancied themselves clever manipulators, but they had underestimated their adversaries. The consequences were now undeniable. Later that evening, Ethan and Maggie celebrated their triumph at the opulent Grand Meridian Hotel. The private dining room was adorned with gleaming crystal and ornate chandeliers, a fitting backdrop for what they called their victory dinner. "Another rejection for Elijah," Maggie announced, scrolling through her updates. "He applied to Fisher & Sons in Chicago. Their response was immediate thanks to that damning dossier someone sent them." Ethan swirled his whiskey, watching the light dance through the amber liquid. "How's he handling it?" Maggie turned her screen toward him. The live feed showed Elijah slumped in his rental car outside Fisher & Sons, his head resting on the steering wheel. "That makes 4 rejections today." "And his legal situation?" Maggie's smile was predatory. "The SEC investigation is escalating. They're leaning toward criminal charges for financial fraud. His lawyer's already angling for a plea deal." Another ping came from their investigator. "Target K leaving a doctor's appointment, headed to a coffee shop on 8th Avenue. Want to tune in?" Ethan glanced at his watch. "We have time." The coffee shop was modest, nestled between 2 office buildings. Ethan and Maggie monitored the scene through separate vantage points, their live video feed connecting them. "Visual on Olivia," Ethan reported. "She's at a northwest corner table staring at her laptop, probably searching for jobs." "Not that it'll help," Maggie said dryly. They observed Olivia scrolling through job listings, her expression becoming increasingly frantic. Her designer outfit was noticeably worn, and her once prized luxury handbag had been replaced by a simple canvas tote. Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from Janet, Olivia's mother. "Ethan, no matter what's happened, she's carrying your child. Please find it in your heart to forgive her." "Delete it," Maggie instructed firmly. "She's still using the baby to manipulate you." "Already done," Ethan replied. "Just like her plans for me to raise that child." The coffee shop door opened, and Elijah entered, his appearance disheveled and unkempt. "Well, this should be interesting," Maggie muttered. Elijah approached Olivia's table, tension thick in the air. Their microphones captured his strained voice. "We need to talk." Olivia's glare was icy. "Now you want to talk? After weeks of ignoring me?" "Keep your voice down," Elijah hissed, glancing around before sitting. "Have you seen the latest updates from the SEC?" "Seen them?" Olivia laughed bitterly. "It's everywhere. Disgraced CEO under investigation." Hard to miss. This was no laughing matter, Olivia. They weren't joking about the consequences anymore. Jail time, a grim prospect. The irony of it all wasn't lost on her. With a sharp motion, she slammed her laptop shut. Using company funds to sustain an illicit affair? Inevitably, someone always notices. "Spare me," Elijah's voice cut through her turmoil like a blade. "Don't act like you were oblivious to where the money came from. The hotels, the fancy dinners, the gifts. You were more than happy to indulge while it lasted. At least I'm not behind bars. Yet." His tone was a bitter slash. "Not yet," Olivia shot back, her words venomous. "But unlike you, I'm not staring down criminal charges." Elijah's smirk was cruel, his gaze unflinching. "True. You're just a pariah, professionally, socially. Tell me, how's the job hunt? Any marketing firms desperate enough to hire the woman who tried to pass off another man's child as her husband's?" Meanwhile, in the virtual shadows, Ethan and Maggie shared a conspiratorial glance over their video call, watching their carefully orchestrated chaos unfold. Olivia's voice dropped to a venomous whisper. "This is your doing," she spat. "You swore you'd leave Maggie, promised we'd have a life together, a family." Elijah leaned back, a bitter laugh escaping him. "A family? Look at us, Olivia. I'm one step away from indictment, and you're untouchable in the job market. Our reputations are in ruins. What kind of life could we possibly build out of this disaster?" Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I'm pregnant. It's your child." Elijah's eyes darted nervously around the coffee shop. "Keep your voice down," he muttered. "And how can I even be sure it's mine? For all I know, you were planning to con me too." The slap rang out loud and sharp, freezing the air. Olivia's face burned with fury. "How dare you!" she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. "After everything we've lost, you question me?" Elijah's hand brushed his stinging cheek. "Your honesty, your loyalty? That's rich, coming from someone who intended to deceive her husband about the baby's paternity." From their vantage point, Maggie's voice was icy and precise. "Now?" she asked. "Do it," Ethan replied. Their phones buzzed simultaneously. Olivia glanced at her screen, then at Elijah. His face turned ashen as he scrolled through his notifications. "Another law firm just refused to represent me," he murmured. "How is this even happening?" Olivia's voice cracked. "Every application I send gets rejected, even for entry-level jobs. It's like someone's blacklisting us." Elijah's expression hardened. "Someone who knows exactly how to dismantle us," he said darkly. Realization dawned in Olivia's eyes. "Ethan and Maggie," she whispered. "This is their doing." On the other side of the screen, Maggie's smile was coldly triumphant. "Took them long enough to figure it out," she remarked. Ethan's fingers danced over his keyboard and he hit send with finality. Moments later, another notification lit up Elijah's phone. His face drained of color. "The charity board, they're releasing a public statement, outlining my moral failures." Olivia stared blankly at her own phone. "The Marketing Association, they're pulling my membership, professional misconduct, ethical violations." The two sat in heavy silence, their downfall crashing over them like a tidal wave. "It's over," Elijah said at last, his voice hollow. "We're finished." "What do we do now?" Olivia asked, her hand unconsciously resting on her stomach. Elijah rose, adjusting his disheveled tie. "There is no we, Olivia. You're on your own." Without another glance, he walked away. Olivia remained seated, frozen, her silent tears tracing paths down her cheeks as defeat enveloped her. Across town, Ethan and Maggie observed, victorious. "Mission accomplished?" Maggie murmured. "Almost," Ethan replied, glancing at his watch. "One more move." The city shimmered under the fading sunlight as Ethan and Maggie prepared to finalize their plan from the rooftop bar of a luxury hotel. Below them, the world bustled on, oblivious. Maggie set her phone down. Elijah's lawyer called. The SEC found even more incriminating evidence. "What's the damage?" Ethan asked, his voice steady. "At least 5 years in prison," Maggie said with a faint smirk, "and full restitution of the stolen funds." Ethan leaned back, satisfied. "And Olivia?" Maggie turned her tablet toward him, showing a desperate social media post. "Selling her designer wardrobe, trying to scrape together enough for a security deposit on some rundown apartment in River Heights." A message popped up from their private investigator, confirming the target's location. Ethan checked the time. Right on schedule. At the restaurant below, Olivia sat in a corner booth, nervously shredding a napkin. Maggie glanced at her phone. "Elijah's just arrived. He looks awful." They watched as he entered, his once immaculate appearance now ragged and worn. He scanned the room before spotting Olivia. Ethan's whisper was low. "Let them destroy themselves." "You're late," Olivia snapped as Elijah slid into the seat opposite her. "Traffic," he said shortly, loosening his tie. "Why meet here?" "Because no one would think to find us here," she replied, leaning closer. "We need a strategy." Elijah laughed harshly. "A strategy? Olivia, there's no strategy. I'm facing years in prison. You can't get a job. It's over." "We could leave," she said desperately. "Start fresh. For the baby." "Stop." Elijah's voice was ice. "There's no starting over. No us. It's done." "After everything?" Her voice cracked. "After all your promises?" "Promises?" Elijah's laugh was cold. "Look where those promises got us. I've lost my business, my name, my future. Now the board's demanding $1 million in restitution. My lawyer says prison is unavoidable." "But the baby," she said, her voice breaking. Elijah's eyes were hard. "A baby I can't provide for from a cell?" Ethan and Maggie observed from their hidden vantage point, the final stages of their plan unfolding with surgical precision. Their targets' lives were collapsing, and the ending was far worse than the beginning. Elijah's expression was frigid, his eyes as sharp as frostbitten steel. "Isn't this your specialty?" he asked, his voice low and biting. "Convincing men to fund your children?" The crisp slap of Olivia's hand against his cheek echoed across the dining room, silencing the murmur of conversation. Guests turned their heads, their eyes riveted to the unfolding drama. Olivia stood rigid, trembling with barely restrained anger. "How dare you!" she seethed, her voice quaking yet firm. "You said you loved me!" Her voice cracked on the last word, betraying the depth of her hurt. Loved. Elijah's fingers grazed his reddened cheek, his gaze cold and unyielding. "Love doesn't annihilate everything it touches," he replied, his tone sharp. "We didn't love each other, Olivia. We were addicted to the secrecy, the thrill of it all." At a nearby table, Ethan and Maggie exchanged triumphant glances. Their meticulously laid plans were unfolding exactly as they had envisioned. The time had come to deliver the final blow. "Shall we?" Maggie whispered, her tone poised. Ethan's lips curled into a faint smirk as he pressed send on his phone. Almost instantly, both Olivia's and Elijah's phones buzzed, shattering the charged silence. Olivia's face drained of color as her eyes scanned the message. Her hands trembled, clutching the device as though it might disintegrate. "No," she whispered, her voice fragile. "This can't be real." Elijah snatched his phone, scrolling with mounting panic. His breath hitched as realization struck. "Oh God, no," he murmured, his voice barely audible. The messages were damning, detailed dossiers of incriminating evidence sent to every contact that could ruin them. Employers, social circles, and any potential escape routes. Their reputations were obliterated. Life as they had known it was over. "Ethan and Maggie," Elijah finally muttered, the pieces clicking into place. "They engineered this, every single part of it. They ruined us." Olivia's voice was little more than a breath. "No," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "We ruined ourselves. They just made sure we paid the price." Elijah's chair scraped loudly against the floor as he stood. His movements were stiff, his expression resolute. "I'm going to the authorities," he declared. "Cooperating might lessen the fallout." His hands fumbled slightly as he adjusted his tie. "Goodbye, Olivia. Don't contact me again." As he strode out of the restaurant, Olivia collapsed into her chair, pressing her hands to her abdomen as silent tears streamed down her face. Her body shuddered with grief and regret. Ethan rose from his seat, extending an arm toward Maggie. "Shall we?" he asked. Together they strolled past Olivia's table, their steps deliberate, ensuring she saw them. Olivia's gasp broke the air. "Ethan!" she choked out, her voice strangled. "Please!" He paused briefly but didn't turn. "Please what?" he asked, his tone glacial. "Forgive you? Help you? Play the dutiful partner while you built your fantasies with someone else?" Olivia's voice cracked. I'm sorry." "Sorry you did it," Maggie interjected, her tone razor sharp. "Or sorry you got caught." Olivia's gaze darted between them, her mind piecing together the puzzle. "You two planned this," she whispered, the weight of betrayal sinking in. "All of it." "Call it justice," Ethan replied, his voice devoid of emotion. "You used us, treated us like disposable pawns in your charade. Now you get to face the consequences." Her voice trembled with desperation. "But you've destroyed everything." "Exactly," Maggie said, her tone calm and unwavering. "Every escape plan, every dream, every facade you built. We left no stone unturned." Olivia's face crumpled as despair took hold. Her words were barely audible. "Why?" Ethan's response was curt. "Because choices have consequences, and now you'll live with yours for the rest of your life." They left her sobbing at the table, the fractured remnants of her life scattered like ash. Outside, the city lights shimmered, painting the night with endless possibilities. As they reached their vehicles, Maggie glanced at Ethan. "Ready to move forward?" Ethan nodded, his smile faint but satisfied. "Boston for you, Chicago for me, clean slates miles apart." Her confidence was palpable. "A fitting conclusion." "Flawless execution," Ethan added, checking his watch. "Elijah should be spilling everything to the prosecutors by now, and Olivia, she's burned every bridge she had." Maggie's smile held a glint of triumph. "They thought they were writing a romance. Turns out it was a revenge plot all along. Ethan opened his car door. We made sure they got exactly what they deserved. Without a backward glance, they drove off in opposite directions, leaving behind the wreckage of two lives undone by greed and betrayal. Ahead lay new horizons, fresh opportunities, and the quiet satisfaction of a plan perfectly executed. Ethan and Maggie had no need to linger in the ruins. They had better places to be and better futures to claim. My friend, and this is the end of the story. If you liked this story, then put your royal like and subscribe to the channel. May the force be with you.